for joining.
Thank you.
I saw your page because I work with young girls. I don't know if I mentioned that to you. So I'm always looking for, resources and places that I can send them that are like welcoming and bright. And your page is so bright. Like I think I'm like high functioning autistic because I get like excited by like colors. Her page, it just stands out. So can you just tell us a little bit about what it is you do? I know it's called Not a Doormat. Is your organization?
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what it is you seek to accomplish with that?
Absolutely. So I chose the name Not a Doormat because when I was 26 years old, it was my first time being free from abuse. I grew up in an abusive home. My dad was my abuser, so I was one of those people who grew up thinking that being a doormat was a normal way to be. So when I finally gained my freedom, I really started to realize how much of a doormat I had been and how much I had denied my authentic self. I had no autonomy at all. I couldn't make decisions for myself. I didn't know what kind of food I liked or what I liked to dress like or anything. So I was really starting over, and I felt like just a dirty old doormat that people had wiped their feet on. And so a few years went by, and I actually only started this account last year in June. I am a millennial, but I really am not very good at technology. So I was new to Instagram, and I noticed that mental health accounts were really popular, especially ones that use like art or comic characters. So I kind of struggled with how can I get my message out there that you are not a doormat, because I've been a substance abuse counselor. I'm also a certified biblical life counselor. So I learned a lot about, young people. They're so trapped. They don't know up from down a lot of times, especially when you're coming from a situation like I was, where you were raised to think it was normal. So I wanted to provide like a community space on Instagram, not just about the aesthetics. Although I did come to understand that the brightness and everything, I wanted to balance out the depth of my messages because I speak a lot of hard truths. And I think balancing it out with the bright colors and, it makes it more attractive and easier for survivors or victims to kind of soak the message in. But also because of my background, I'm not very articulate sometimes when I'm trying to like speak truth to people. I'm like, listen, you got to hear this. And I think learning how to do the digital art and put the bright colors in there just reminded me of, I need to be a cheery person for people because, even when you're not a survivor of abuse, everyday life can be just so depressing and filled with anxiety. And I think that it's really important we help give people, an outlet and a different perspective that, things will be better soon. Or if not soon, things will be better eventually. And it's really all about how we see things. So,
I love that.
Yeah, Not a Doormat is thank you. It's all about, not being a doormat and helping victims and survivors gain their voice and feel more confident in sharing what they've been through. Because I think one thing about being a doormat is that you don't want to speak up for yourself. You're ashamed of what you went through and you feel like nobody wants to hear it, or you're maybe afraid of people judging you. So I really just wanted to create a community where people could come to me and ask me questions, which is why I have a link on my profile for free counseling. So I offer free counseling to survivors of abuse and trauma. And it's really, I guess it's just my best effort, what I can do from where I'm at now. So,
and I love that you took your story and turned that into something that could help someone else. And I just had this conversation with someone where I said, I feel like the people that have had the biggest battles to fight, you were given that task for a reason because you have a bigger purpose. And if you haven't like been through it and lived through it, it's harder for you to preach that gospel to somebody else. To me, I think you have
Absolutely.
to been through some stuff before you can really, be authentic. And especially if you're dealing with younger clients, like they can see through BS, sick and spotted a mile away.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And they don't like to be preached to or preached at.
Right. That's
Gavriela, I have a question. I want to
Okay.
know, like, what what's the age range of clients that you see, or people that you like provide counseling for? Is it just like teenagers, or have you seen?
Actually, I've seen everybody from, I think my youngest client was 12.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize it until after the fact, but of course on Instagram you can't always tell right away. And the oldest person I have seen was in their 60s. So I have literally everybody in between. I even have, middle-aged men contacting me sometimes, people that you would think my demographic wouldn't reach. But it's amazing how abuse and trauma just kind of, it seeps into every age, race, ethnic group. I mean, everybody. It's affected everybody. So I guess the average, though, would probably be 25-ish. People in their early 20s is probably the average.
I just got a post, right before the show. Someone texted me and they said, it's a Twitter post, and he says, I was on a Zoom call with former colleagues, and the talk went to sexual abuse as kids. He said, we realized that 9 out of 13 men on the call were abused as kids.
I saw that tweet too. Yeah, it really touched me.
9 out of 13. So men, you rarely hear men talk about the trauma and the abuse that they face as children. And unfortunately, that gets channeled into them abusing other people because they have all these things bottled up that they never got to address. And
absolutely.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So I wanted to know, what was the ratio? You kind of answered my question of men versus women that come and seek help from you.
Well, I can give you a more accurate idea. 93% of my followers are women and 8% or 7% are men. But that 7% of men are very active and, they're very interactive with me, probably more so than my female ratio. So I can tell that men are really hungry and they want to learn. And it's, I appreciate how you brought that up, though, because like my abuser, for example, he was abused and raped repeatedly as a child. And my little brothers were as well. So I think it's really important that we open that forum up. There's a lot of women out there, bless their hearts, that are just so anti-men and no, all men are bad and toxic masculinity and all of that. And I think that we can balance out that narrative by just showing that men are also human and they're also susceptible to abuse. Just because they are a male doesn't mean that they are immune to that. So I think, yeah.
I don't know. I was wondering, you have a book also. I saw it on Amazon. Is it still available on Amazon? She has a book.
Yes, it is.
Is it The Devil is a Narcissist?
Yes.
I was going to say The Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah.
That's my mind. Different book. The Devil is a Narcissist. And if you have just a basic, biblical foundation, that Satan was the most beautiful angel, right?
Yes.
But he got full of himself, and then this is what happened. And I'm like,
absolutely.
Do you think that social media and cyberspace is encouraging people to be narcissists or escalating our ability to become narcissists?
I want to say yes, but in the end, I think it's really a personal responsibility because everybody processes information differently. Myself, for example, I could easily fall into, being narcissistic on IG, taking selfies all the time. And I do think that society encourages that. Absolutely. I mean, the largest following on Instagram is Kim Kardashian or something. It's all about, the sex appeal and all of that. But I think that we need to stop giving society so much power to mold and shape us and say, oh, you're directing my inner narrative. You have a responsibility for that, and I think that survivors and victims of abuse really especially need to hear that because with narcissistic abuse, the thing about it, and the reason why I chose The Devil is a Narcissist is because the spiritual root to narcissism is pride. And it doesn't matter how you break it down. It always comes back to that one spiritual root issue of pride. And in the Bible, it says that God resists the proud. And that's a huge deal. And And on the opposite end, it says that God is near the brokenhearted. So I was kind of trying to paint a picture of how narcissism is probably one of the most evil forms of abuse because it's so multifaceted. There's so many different types of narcissistic abusers out there. Some are overt, some are covert, you know. There's just so much. So I go over all of that in the book. But I think for us personally, it's important that we let people know society doesn't get to say who you are. So what if society is pushing all of that on you? You can say, no, I want to be different. And it's really not as hard as it seems, because once you find that inner truth for yourself, it's almost impossible to let go. You know, you feel that passion and that drive to say, I'm going to be different, you know. So I hope that answered your question.
That does answer my question. And it's such a very thin line, because it's like on the one hand, we're teaching self-love, self-awareness, and, you know, me, love yourself. So I can see how that can easily, you know, translate into someone becoming a narcissist. It's like, you told me to love myself. You told me that I don't need anyone. Mm-hmm. And what I'm finding is, what historically I found, is a lot of people that fall into that category, they don't really have a very firm spiritual base. It's kind of like, I just believe whatever I want to believe on whatever day of the week. So they don't have those basic biblical principles, or even, you know, if you're Muslim, those principles guiding, where it teaches God is supposed to be the center, not you. And right. Also supposed to do for others and help others with what you have, just yourself. So I love that you tie the faith aspect into your counseling, because I think that's what's missing.
Yeah, it's important. It's important for sure. Gavriela, I also Shirley earlier in the show mentioned that narcissism is kind of an epidemic, right? How do you feel like narcissism is growing rapidly? Because over the last few years is when I've heard about narcissism the most. I mean, I knew that it existed, but I feel like it's a lot more prevalent, and maybe it's more in your face because of social media. Do you feel like it's continuing to grow, or do you see it just being the same but now more open?
I want to say it's kind of like autism was. You know, back in the 80s, autism was there, but they didn't know what to call it. As the mental health community has grown and more issues of the DSM have come out, I think we're on the DSM-5 now. I think that psychologists have just had more time to study it. And now with the power of social media, I mean, it's really an engine. A lot of counselors are going online today to supplement, you know, their gifting, because, you know, personal counseling sometimes, especially when it's just all about the money, sometimes it gets a little soul sucking. So I think the reason we're seeing such an increase in, you know, narcissism awareness right now, it's kind of like people are starting to gain that awareness. They're coming out of that cognitive dissonance and saying, wow, you know, there's a name for this. This is something that we can call it. But I think that narcissism is as old as the devil himself, you know. It's been around since the beginning of time. We're just now kind of waking up to it, I suppose.
Do you think that someone can change? Do you think once a narcissist, always a narcissist, or do you think that that person can actually see the change behaviors?
I love that you asked that question. I actually get asked that question a lot. So I want to say, with God, all things are possible. But on the other aspect, with the root of narcissism being pride, it's nearly impossible for a narcissist to come to that self-awareness and say, whoa, I really am doing these things, and I really am this way, and this is why. I do believe it's possible. However, the narcissists themselves would have to be very open and subjective to receiving counseling. And I'm not talking like a one-time talking session. I mean like repeated counseling, because narcissism it has a grip. I mean, it's almost like, you know, a reprobate mind, where somebody just can't process the truth anymore, so they make up their own truth about things. So I don't want to say that it's necessarily impossible, because we do know that God is a miracle worker, and with him
everything is possible.
But he doesn't manipulate the will of humans, because that's not love, and God is love. So he's not going to force a narcissist to change. You know, that's why it's so difficult for narcissists to be reformed narcissist in that aspect.
I also feel like it's really difficult because narcissism has become such a huge part of that person's identity. Like if you begin to unravel the years of narcissism and abuse that they've been inflicting on other people, who are they? Who would they be? Because it's an empty box, right? Like it's an empty box. Like you break the box apart, what's on the inside? Absolutely nothing. So they would have to like really start from scratch. Wow, that's deep.
Yeah. I put a post up I think yesterday where it was saying that the reason that the bond between a victim and an abuser is so strong is because they have one thing in common, and that is the desire and the need to be loved. It's just that abusers do so by trying to manipulate, and victims do so by trying to be a doormat or to be, make themselves smaller. But at the core of it, love cannot be attained through fear. With narcissism, the core of their fear is being exposed. Narcissists have to have all the power and all the control, and they have to have this perfect image in their mind. And if anything contradicts that, they feel injured on the inside. So you're very much right about it being an empty shell on the inside, but I like to look at it where even the tiniest speck of that core essence of needing to be loved still is inside of a narcissist. And I know that's so difficult to say because all we can see when we see their behavior is evil, but I believe underneath all that pain, if you could just get down to it, there might be a slim opportunity to really speak to that person's heart. But again, it's like you said, they spend so much time in that mind frame that when they're scared, that without that, they don't know who they are. Without that control, they don't feel comfort, it shakes their whole foundation. So I would agree with you.
Isn't that an interesting thing?
Because the next word here is the empath, right? So you feel like if you're not a narcissist, okay, then you must be an empath. And I know that's not true. But for me, I was in, and I know Emmanuel knows this story to death. He's sick of hearing about it. But I lived with a narcissist for 6 whole years. And I saw the pain, the trauma, everything that had happened. And I tried my best to see past all the ugly to help him. And it's like the more I did for him, the worse the abuse got. And so I just got fed up and said, I can't do this anymore with you because my own home became a prison. And I'm like, I can no longer. So does it necessarily mean that you're an empath if you're not a narcissist? Is there only the two categories?
And I don't think that there is. I won't say absolutely not. I'm not any kind of leading authority on that. But in my opinion, I think that empaths are highly sensitive people, and you don't have to be a highly sensitive person in order to fall into the trap of a narcissist, because narcissists are very charismatic. They can basically sucker anybody in. You don't have to be an empath to be wooed and bedazzled at first. But I do think, I will say this, I think that empaths get trapped and stay trapped longer than people who are not empaths, because people who are not empaths won't, that deep connection won't claw into them so much. They'll be more like, I'm not putting up with this. Bye. Yeah. Empaths
bye, Felicia.
Are more willing.
Like all my friends.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So, empaths are they're more willing to bend over backwards repeatedly to their own demise, because at the core of an empath's essence is, they want to be loving and pleasing to people. And we resonate so much with other people's emotions that you feel that and you think that you have to fix it or you have to fill it, or so I hope that answered your question.
It does answer my question.
Shirley, it's so crazy because today, and I talk to Shirley outside of the show all the time, but I was working out and I was listening to like the music on my phone on shuffle, and every single love song that came up is about like the hurt that somebody's inflicted on these people. So they're singing out, right? Feeling like their life is over. How can I win you back? I'm going to do my best. Like all these people are empaths, clearly, because they're being tortured. All they want to do is please that partner that is abusing them, right? So I wonder what the world would be like if we didn't have those songs or that music that is feeding into our ability to like put a stop to a lot of this abuse. Because we see it in the media all the time, right? Like the romance and the like romantic comedies. It's always about like the love in the end, and you have to put up with so much in order to get to that point of the fairy tale ending. Like, I wonder how much of that is affecting people as well. Isn't that?
I would say that it probably affects people a lot more than we realize, especially in these quarantine days. The only thing that people have to do is sit and soak all that stuff in, you know. So I definitely agree with you that we're kind of incubating the problem by romanticizing that kind of abuse, you know. And it's true that true love doesn't come without pain, but there's a huge difference between the pain of change and growth and the pain of being abused and manipulating somebody. So
that's right. I would also like to point out, Satan was over the music department. Okay.
Yes, he was. That's a good point.
All the
Wait,
time.
are you serious?
Yes, he uses music to get to people. That's why you have to be very careful what you listen to. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
His first line of defense is music, because it seeps in. What you listen to resonates.
Absolutely.
So you have to be very careful. I'm being told that we have 4 minutes left. So
that went by fast, by the way.
Yes, it did.
Okay, for you, if someone is in a situation where they know that they're being abused, or they suspect that they are a victim of abuse, what are some things that you recommend they do immediately in this, especially in this time where we're still self-quarantining and we're still social distancing? What can someone do immediately if they feel like they are being abused?
So I would say it depends on what kind of abuse, because if it's physical, I'm going to tell everybody, run for the hills, get out. It doesn't matter if you're sleeping on the streets. It's better to have that freedom and that control over yourself than to be physically put in harm's way. If it's more emotional, verbal, psychological, I would say sit down and make a game plan for yourself. Yeah. It is okay to try and communicate with the abuser, but I don't always recommend that without a third party there, because once the abuser knows that you're onto them, then they start turning on the charm. They start saying, oh, baby, I'll change. I'll do this. I promise. I swear. And 9 out of 10 times, I almost want to say 10 out of 10 times, that is never true. So the other thing is, I would verbalize it. I would let myself hear myself say, I am being abused and I deserve better. Because research shows that you believe what comes out of your own mouth more than you believe what you hear from somebody else. And when you hear yourself say that, the truth of it sinks into you. It gives you the power, and I believe that it'll allow the Holy Spirit to work inside of you, even if you're not a believer. I completely believe that God's looking out for everybody. So that's the best advice I can say. Try to make a game plan for yourself, and don't tell your abuser you're leaving. Absolutely do not do that. Just do it. Don't talk about it. Just do it, because the most dangerous time for a victim is right before they leave. And if the abuser doesn't know you're leaving, then you're more protected than you are if you expose yourself. So that's important.
I like speaking it out loud. And I know I definitely started doing that, listening to you know, different experts in the field. And I found that the more I said it and proclaimed it, I started to get angry with myself for allowing that to happen. Then I got angry with him, and then that's what said, you know what, it's time to get out of here. There was more empathy at that point.
Absolutely.
So I feel like you have to kind of get bold and adamant about it, and definitely don't tell them, because that's when it gets very, very dangerous. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't make it out alive because they are telling or giving, you know, abuser. So,
especially the empaths.
Right.
The empaths, they will make up excuses. They will make up excuses. Yeah, no, it's so true. Shirley, are you an empath?
Not anymore. I've turned into a pretty cold-hearted person now. Children and animals.
Gavriela, you're an empath?
I not ever. I mean, I guess I am. I feel people's emotions very deeply. I don't really look at myself that way, because I guess the Bible doesn't really have any clear definition for what an empath would be, but I am an extremely empathetic person. I mean, like I said, I was with my abuser for 24 years, you know, so, and it took him leaving my life. You know, I was still a daddy's girl. I was still like, woo, ready. So I guess I probably would be considered an empath. I should take a test or something and find out. I don't know.
You should.
Before we get out of here, let them know where they can find you and where we can get this book, because I need people to read.
So my name is Gavriela Powers. You can find me on IG at not.a.doormat. So there's a period in between each word there, not a doormat. If you click the link in my bio, I have a direct link to the Amazon website for The Devil is a Narcissist. Or you could just go to Amazon and type in The Devil is a Narcissist. It'll come right up. I have it in ebook format and paperback as well. I do have other books available too, so you can see those in my link as well. And I have a website, gavrielapowers.com. And that's Gavriela with a V, not a B.
Yes, I'm going to emphasize it. We're going to post this information also, but it is with a V, as in Victor.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
But thank you so much for joining us. Melissa, if you can hear us out there, we got you. We're going to film you.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Have no fear, but be safe.
Thank you so much for being on.
You too. Thank you. Happy healing, you guys.
Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Next week, you guys on the
Bye, y'all.
And thanks for coming and hanging out.
Bye. Thank you.